the October 7th, 2020 regular meeting of the James City County Planning Commission. Mr. Holt, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Knoll.
Present.
Ms. Knoll represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose, who represents the Roberts District, could not be with us this evening. Ms. Leverins.
Here.
Ms. Leverins is an at-large member and is this year's vice chair. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman represents the Berkeley District. Mr. O'Connor.
Present.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member. Mr. Kropp.
Here.
Mr. Kropp represents the Powhatan District and is this year's chair to the Planning Commission. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development and Planning for the county. And also joining me this evening is Mr. Max Halavin, our Deputy County Attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Everybody, as is the custom, received a resolution in their packet for the meeting tonight that allows us to conduct this virtually. In summary, on September the 8th, 2020, the board readopted the continuity of government ordinance, which under certain circumstances permits this commission to conduct today's meeting by electronic or telephonic means without a quorum of members physically present. May I have a motion for adoption of that resolution for tonight's meeting?
Yeah, this is Frank. Move to approve.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mr. Holt, would you call the roll?
Ms. Knoll.
Aye.
Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman.
Sorry. Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Ms. Leverins.
Aye.
And Mr. Kropp.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the public comment period, and these are for topics not subject to a public hearing tonight. I will open the public comment period and ask Mr. Holt if there were any comments submitted.
None for general open public comment period this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'll then close the public comment period and move to reports of the commission. Mr. Haldeman, DRC.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to pull it up, but I'll be 1 second here. Bear with me.
All right. Well, while you're doing that, we'll move to Mr. Polster for the policy committee.
Sir, there is nothing to report. We did not meet.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And whenever you're ready, Mr. Haldeman.
Sorry, Rich.
Oh, that's not a problem at all.
I forgot to pull it up. Here we go. The Development Review Committee met on September 23rd, 2020, came to order at 4:01 p.m. with all members present. Mr. Alex Baruch, Acting Principal Planner, and Mr. Darrell Cook, James City County Assistant Stormwater Director, represented the county. The DRC then considered Site Plan 20-0060, Chickahominy Riverfront Park Shoreline Stabilization - Tree Removal Site Plan Amendment. A site plan amendment proposing a shoreline stabilization project at Chickahominy Riverfront Park was submitted and approved last year. The sections of the site continue to erode, and 6 additional trees less than 12 inches in diameter must be removed within this section in order to effectively address the problem and include this additional area in the stabilization effort. The planning director finds these removals acceptable, but the DRC must also approve the request, which it did unanimously. The meeting was adjourned at 4:11 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Haldeman. Any questions or comments for Mr. Haldeman on that report? All right. We will then move to the consent agenda, and consent agenda items are deemed to be non-controversial. However, a planning commissioner can pull an item for further discussion, and we have 3 items this evening. One is minutes of the September 2nd, 2020 regular meeting of the Planning Commission. 2 is the Development Review Committee, action item SP-20-0060, Chickahominy Riverfront Park, that Mr. Haldeman just reported on. And the third one is the proposed calendar update for 2020-2021 that adds the October 27th joint work session and also stipulates where our meetings will be held when they're not being held virtually. May I have a motion, or would someone like to pull one of those consent items?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. We now move to our public hearings. We have one hearing this evening, SUP-20-0016, Norge Solar Farm SUP Amendment. Mr. Leininger, good evening, and I think it's your turn now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Ms. Robin Lucy has applied for a special use permit amendment for 320, 339, 341, and 345 Farmville Lane to amend SUP-0028-2016 approved by the Board of Supervisors on January 9th, 2018. This SUP amendment would amend condition number 17 of the approved resolution to extend the commencement of construction by 12 months from the original expiration date. Should this application be approved, the new expiration date would be January 9th, 2023. There are no further changes to the remaining SUP conditions or master plan. Staff finds the proposal to be compatible with the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and surrounding development, and recommends the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application subject to the proposed condition. Since the release of the packet, we did receive one citizen comment that was forwarded to you all earlier today. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Leininger. Any questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yes, sir.
Just one quick question. I know in past years with site plan amendments, the state code was amended to extend, beyond. This was primarily driven during the economic downturn, but allowed site plans to be extended. Does that apply in this case as well, or is this just strictly limited to the 1 year?
This is Paul here. Max, I see you unmuted. Did you want to weigh in on this one, or?
Yeah, I was going to say there was an extension for that just continued to go on and on for legislative case approvals and subdivision plats, things like that. All of the plans that were previously approved expired July 1 of this year. I don't know the specific timeline of this application, but in general, all of those extensions expired July 1 of this year.
Okay. No, I was just curious. I just want to make sure if we're extending for a year and there's another hiccup that we don't have another vehicle that we could use, or if we should go beyond the 1 year, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah. There is another bill that's currently being, it just passed the House with amendments today that may extend things like this, but not currently law.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right. How about disclosures? Anybody have any conversations or meetings with the applicant or the applicant's representative? If so, I did not. Okay, it looks like no one. In that case, I'll open the public hearing. And I know that the applicant, Robert Lucy from Virginia Electric and Power Company, is with us. And if you would like to make a statement or a presentation, you're welcome to, but it's by no means required.
Good evening. Hi. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Robin Lucy, and I'm currently a business development manager at Dominion. And I just wanted to thank everyone for inviting, us to the meeting tonight. And also, we just look forward to seeing this project become operational in your county. So I just wanted to thank everyone for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lucy. Any questions for the applicant? No?
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yes.
Just for Ms. Lucy, are we certain a year is enough time? I have two comments on it. One being, if we think it'll take more than a year to get permits or other approvals, then we should grant it, and to not have to keep going through the legislative process over and over. So thank you.
Ms. Lucy, did you want to address that?
Sure, yes. We have met with our construction team, and they have entered into a contract with with an EPC firm as of last month in September. So according to, all the feedback and all the studies that they've done, this timeline fits in well. It looks like it should be Q3 of 2022. That's where we're expecting this facility to be operational.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions for the applicant? All right. And Mr. Leininger did mention that there was one speaker card in the form of an email that was submitted. Mr. Holt or Mr. Leininger, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mm-hmm. We did receive an email, just to summarize it, concerns about the buffering and making sure that none of the RPA was going to be disturbed during the land clearing. As part of the site plan process and during stormwater and resource protection pre-construction meeting, staff would be able to verify the limits of clearing and ensure none of the RPA or the required buffering is impacted.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other comments submitted or phone messages regarding this case? Mr. Polster?
No, just for the discussion.
Okay. So there were no other comments submitted by citizens, so I will close the public hearing and turn to Mr. Polster.
Just a question of clarification from staff. As I recall, for agricultural lands, you can disturb the RPA. And what the gentleman was talking about was the elimination of trees and the fact that, okay, you're going to replant them, but it takes a long time. And where he sits is on the other side of that ravine of the RPA that drops down almost 30 feet. And it's as steep on the other side from where he is. So I think what he was asking us is whether or not somebody was going to mark the trees to ensure that it didn't get chopped down, of which, if I understand it correctly, they could, and then they could replant it. If I'm wrong, tell me.
So, Mr. Polster, Paul Holt here, just for clarification. So, again, as part of the site plan review process, county staff will ensure that the site plan substantively matches up to the area. Both SRP staff and planning staff will ensure that what is shown as proposed for construction and proposed for site clearing substantively matches the master plan. If you'll remember back a couple of years, part and parcel of the discussion for this site and what was important to the applicant at the time and as well as staff, there is an area on sort of the north side of the site where there's some significant erosion happening and some head cut that has occurred as a result of some unmitigated runoff from the property. And as part of this stormwater and runoff mitigation proposed at the time, there was some discussion that part of the work that might include going into the RPA a little bit, but the idea was that there would be an active plan to mitigate that runoff, restore and fix that head cut as part of sort of quote unquote fixing those existing conditions and more permanently. But beyond that, the proposal would need to match the limits of the clearing as shown on the master plan. So that consistency determination would happen at site plan stage, and then ultimately where the limits of clearing are, and based on where the siltation, the siltation fence and the E&S measures that would be put in place, staff would verify those prior to clearing. And, you know, especially for the gentleman's concern of making sure any mature trees outside of those limits of clearing in the RPA or not, certainly to the degree that those large mature existing trees contribute to what's delineated in the required buffers. Staff and the team over at Stormwater Resource Protection will work to ensure that there is no site clearing outside of those approved limits. And so again, to the degree that there are existing big mature trees and vegetation in that required buffer, that will absolutely all be delineated at the site plan stage. One, so that we can ensure the buffer required as part of the SUP conditions is provided as expected. And then again, too, like with any development site in the county, anywhere in the county, the folks there in that division will help to ensure that what gets done should match the approved set of plans. I hope that.
That's my follow-up, and I'm okay with answering his question. But you're right, on the north side as well as the southwest side, where it adjoins where the land below Oakland Point that actually belongs to the county. We've put $1.2 million into trying to stabilize that stream because of the development off of the Croker Norge Richmond Road in there. And so I am concerned that we are careful that we don't lose the investment that we've already made in screwing up the headwaters of the Yarmouth Creek with this project. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Polster. I see Mr. Haldeman has his hand.
Thank you. This is apropos nothing. I'm just curious. In Mr. Leininger's memo, page 1 under planning and zoning history, there's a reference to A2 limited agricultural district. And I've never heard of that, and I can't find it in the zoning ordinance. And I was just curious, can somebody enlighten me on that? It doesn't apply to this case at all. I'm just curious.
So this is Paul again. So we used to have an A2 district a long time ago, okay. And it was phased out. It was phased out at some point. So yes, you won't find any current references. We've had a couple districts over time that have sort of come and gone, and A2 was one of them.
How does that? I'll wait. I'll bring this up later because it's not germane to this case. But I have another question about it. So.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Haldeman?
No, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Hand down, right?
Yes, you did. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have a follow-on.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else? In that case, may I have a discussion or motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve special use permit 20-0016 Norge Solar Farm SUP amendment.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Polster. Mr. Holt, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Ms. Knoll.
Aye.
Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Ms. Leverins.
Aye.
And Mr. Croft.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. And thanks to Ms. Lucy for being available for the discussion. Next on the agenda is Planning Commission considerations, of which there are none this evening. and we roll into Planning Director's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Other than what's been prepared and included in your packets, I don't have anything new or additional to add this evening, but I'm certainly available to help answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Holt? Okay, thank you, Mr. Holt. I appreciate that. We now move into Planning Commission discussion and requests. The only note I have is a reminder that the Board of Supervisors coverage for October is Ms. Leverance.
Yes.
And I understand that Mr. Polster would like to have a discussion on a topic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope everybody has had a chance to take a look at the one email that I sent around, and that email was really kind of motivated by the Hill Pleasant Farm Solar Farm SUP that we took a look at, and the chairman's idea about pollinators, which the applicant accommodated and had the experience of doing that with the pieces that he'd done in Virginia and had done in North Carolina and planning to do in Virginia. I also remember Mr. O'Connor's comment of a concern about the proliferation of solar farms into the rural areas for it. So the thing that I stumbled upon, which I thought was kind of interesting, was a document that was enclosed in the email, which was the Virginia Pollinator Smart Solar Industry Comprehensive Manual, which is sponsored by the DEQ and DCR folks. And as I went through that, I said, geez, that would have been really nice to have that when we saw the Hill Pleasant Farm piece, to kind of have a checklist to go through of the things that you want to be concerned about for. The second piece that I stumbled upon, which talks about the regulatory authority associated with having something like this checklist on the local level, was the recent update to some Virginia code, and this idea that the governor and the Commonwealth is looking for 100% carbon-free by 2045, and requires nearly all of the coal-fired plants of the Dominion Power guys to go away. So I'm not surprised that Dominion Power is moving out quickly, and as I saw in today's Gazette, they're going to have something over in the York County area for that. So I don't think this is a passing fancy. I think we'll probably see more of it. And so one of the things that struck me as I dug into this thing is that the DEQ guys had been looking at the locality area, and they kind of came to the idea that their responsibilities at the Commonwealth, but they also recognize the responsibilities of locality in terms of the siting, health and safety issues, the decommissioning piece that we asked about for the Hill Pleasant Farm. But there's this notion of being environmentally responsible for the construction piece. And within some of our ordinances or zoning ordinances, we give density bonuses for either Goldcraft or LEEDs for providing facilities that are environmentally carbon low and all that. So anyhow, they also had convened a group of folks, and they came up with some draft solar and wind ordinances for the local area, which was also in that link. So I'm interested in finding out whether or not there may be some consensus among the commissioners about the idea of enacting a solar or wind ordinance for the county, so that when we see this next one coming up, as you saw in the traffic, there's nothing to say that the folks from Dominion Power are going to put native plants or pollinators into that area within their vegetation plan. And if, in fact, we would have heard this case for the first time today and had that ordinance in place, we could have stipulated it as an SUP condition that they do that, which is what we asked the applicant to do with Hillcrest Farm. So anyhow, I'm interested in how you all think about that.
Well, Mr. Polster, just from a personal standpoint, I think that's an excellent suggestion, and I think the timing is perfect because I think this whole range of topics, solar power, wind power, environmental responsibility can be rolled into the comprehensive plan discussions, and certainly action items within the environmental section, for example, that could be the source document, if you will, for an initiating resolution for the policy committee to start digging into these and coming up with the draft ordinances. And again, as I said, this is just my personal opinion, but I very much like the email and the attachment that you sent out. Anybody else?
It's Tim. I haven't had the opportunity to read it, so I will. But does it address, we usually take into consideration whether anything is prime agricultural lands. Does any of the guidance that we see include that? Because we probably want to, if we move forward in drafting something or the consideration, probably want to talk about it a little bit. And to me, again, it goes back to what we want to define as rural lands, and where we want that to, because where we want to permit it. Because if we agree that rural lands are quote unquote open space and farming land, and it's to protect the character and the viewscapes, then, we're going to be limited in those locations. But if we are wide open on it, then, it really opens up places like Forge Road and other places out Route 60.
Mm-hmm. It does, Tim, and I haven't forgotten your concern that you expressed before. And when I replied before, I said the one hitch is wherever you do this, at whatever level of whatever megawatts you're doing, you have to have a way to hook it into the grid, which is what their permit is about for the size and what the Hill Pleasant. What I've thought about is, okay, it's out in the rural lands. Do you have a place to connect to the grid to be able to either sell the power or whatever? And the only thing I've come up with is that, we have the Dominion Power going straight through the county on that line. And so it may be that along that line, they have places where you could be connected from the rural land. But I think that's a question and a discussion that does need to occur to address what you're talking about.
Absolutely, and I think this is where you in the course of the discussion or drafting an ordinance, you look at performance standards and limitations and specifications to make sure that you're not potentially causing some significant adverse impacts either. So and I understand where Tim's coming from on that as well. Anybody else? Right,
because to your point, Frank, the Dominion's transmission lines, bisect Forge Road and that whole corridor. So through Dioskin and across. So to me, it's a very real possibility.
Absolutely, Tim.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else?
Just on if I might, on a separate note, if we're off that subject, just for Mr. Holt, we had talks and conversations about the board wanting some direction on Airbnbs, and I failed to ask him at his director's report, sort of where we are in that process and what our next steps might be.
No, excellent question. Still on our radar. Our focus in terms of where that best slots into the timing of your upcoming meetings and schedule for this fall, I think we'll have a better sense on that once we are able to sort of get through this joint work session on the 27th. Certainly the 27th occurring then allows staff to sort of really sort of turn our attention to refining the schedule for the next 3 months. You know, we've got a bunch to sort of fit in with you, including chapter reviews, some of the preliminary and initiating discussions on the land use applications, and of course, you know, with a lot of the other important details, we've got to slot Airbnb. So, you know, confirming that it's still definitely on our radar and still in the to-do list. I've just got to work with the team here to figure out when that best slots, but that's coming as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Haldeman.
Thanks. Back to A2 limited agricultural. If the county retires a zoning district, how is it a legislative action, I gather? And what happens to the property owners who are zoned in that soon to be retired district? Do they have another district imposed upon them, or do they, how does that work exactly? I'm just curious.
So I'll give you a general answer because, believe it or not, sort of the A2 phased out well before even with me starting in the county on the first round in the mid-90s. That's how long that thing's been gone. But, as you can appreciate, any change in the zoning ordinance is absolutely a legislative item to be done through a public hearing with both the PC and the board. And ultimately, the board has approval. Again, I'll generalize because I haven't had the chance to research all of the specific details. But as I recall, effectively what happened is there was both A1 and A2 zone land, and sort of the net effect was, again, sort of generally and generically speaking, it was a county-initiated rezoning. And so everybody who was in A2 was rezoned to A1 and sort of got merged into the one A1 district that you're familiar with today.
Okay. What if they didn't want to?
Well, I mean, certainly that would have factored into the property owner's request as part of the public hearing process. But, and again, I without having the history, I don't know if there were any of those objections that were raised or what the public outreach or input might have been at the time.
Yeah, my questions are purely hypothetical.
Sure. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like any county initiated rezoning action. That's all of that is taken into account, and ultimately whether it's everything or something or nothing, all that is taken into account in deliberation by the board. But in this case, if the end goal was to eliminate all of A2, and it could have been that bubbled up as a collective desire of those respective homeowners at the time. I don't know the genesis of that request or that move, but if at the end of the day, there's consensus by the board to move forward with a particular action, then again, at the end of that vote, if it's a county initiated action, then the homeowner's property would be rezoned.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion items? Oh.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Mr. Polster.
Yeah, I'm still not sure if I got my question answered. And following the protocol that you used on Monday's PCWG, I just like to hear in a voice vote whether or not there is a consensus that the staff consider as part of the 2045 comp plan a solar and wind ordinance, and to consider for the environmental section, specifically ENV4, any additional strategic actions and actions.
Okay. Mr. Holt, do you have any questions on that comment? And if not, I'll just do a straw vote. Go ahead.
I tell you what, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm a little concerned with doing work of the PC working group at this different venue under the current agenda item of just discussion and requests. So if what I would maybe make a procedural recommendation back to Mr. Polster and to the commission is that if there is consensus for the Planning Commission to make a request of me, which is the current agenda item, to include these two items when we return back to you with some recommendations for GSAs that would include development of these two items, I think that would be a procedurally better fit for where we are, because we don't even have the benefit of having Ms. Wortman here tonight for sort of that straw vote, even though straw votes are non-binding. I think procedurally, I'm channeling.
I'm okay with that. That's fine.
Feel better, yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
No, that's a very good point. Yep. So, go
If there's
ahead.
consensus to point me in that direction, then Mr. Chairman, I'll sort of defer back to you for obtaining that consensus without maybe doing a roll call straw poll.
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to say, Paul, is I don't care about Ms. Wharton because this is the Planning Commission meeting and that's who I'm talking to. And so
Yeah, but Frank, I'm going to interrupt. But it has to go through the Planning Commission working group, of which she's a member, and so and to Paul's point, that's very appropriate. So I think at this point, I did not hear any Planning Commission member that was not in agreement with asking Mr. Holt to proceed with getting those two items on the agenda. If there's anyone who disagrees with that, please say so. Otherwise, Mr. Holt can proceed. Okay. Is that all right with you, Paul?
Oh, yeah, that works great. And we've got a bunch of those and we'll have those on the list for sure.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other discussion item, I would now look for a motion to adjourn to the joint Board of Supervisor PC working group meeting at 4 p.m. on October the 9th. I'm sorry. Look for a motion to adjourn to the PC working group meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on October the 19th.
This is Julie, so move.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Good night.